Good afternoon. Welcome to Kansas City Council Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, February 3, 2026. First up, we have roll call. Kim, will we have roll call, please?
Thank you. Council President Kaur.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce.
Here.
Councilmember Boyd.
Here.
Councilmember Fincher. Councilmember, oops.
Oops.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Troutner.
Here.
Councilmember Shoker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Councilmember Fincher is enjoying her retirement right now. So. All right, next up we have agenda approvals. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, may I have a motion, please?
So move, Madam President.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, approval of minutes for January 20, 2026.
So move, Madam President.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much. Next up, payment of bills. We received those in our email, and hopefully we all had the time to review those. May I have a motion, please?
So move, Madam President.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next up we have liability insurance renewal, and we have our city attorney, Tammy White. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Well, not welcome, but good afternoon. Tammy White, City Attorney. As most of you know, our office took over risk management in May of 2025. That also included taking over insurance procurement for our various insurance coverage that we have throughout the city. They renew on 2 different time periods. So some renew on July 1, others renew on January 1st. So the ones that I'm here to talk to you about today are the ones that renewed on January 1st. And that's for our general liability coverage, our excess workers' compensation coverage, and our cyber risk liability coverage. I wanted to get to the cliff notes and the good news, which is that this resulted in a savings for us over our last year premiums based on some changes that we made. So for 2026, we are saving $142,508.90 on these liability insurance policies. So I'm going to go into kind of some of the details as to why we recognize that savings. So one of the bits that's important to note is what drives our insurance rates. So we are a self-insured entity, but we do have insurance coverage that kicks in once we get up to a high amount. There are things that are beyond our control that impact our costs, some of which is the market. So on the far left, this graph just shows in the span of 10 years, the reduction in the amount of insurers that are out there willing to insure public agencies. So it has continued to decrease, and so when there's less of a market, there's less competition, and that will drive up our costs. Another change, and it's probably hard to read, so I was trying to put a lot of information on these slides, is there are jurisdictional challenges. So in different states, they have different laws, and that will also impact the market because it makes it more risky. So in Washington, one of our issues are we allow for joint and several liability. That's an additional risk for an insurer. We don't have liability caps on tort or liability cases. That is an additional risk for the insurer. That drives up prices. Our legal system, we also have folks that now are starting to treat agencies like a public insurer. So if there is not sufficient insurance elsewhere to cover a car accident, they're going to look to find a reason to hold cities liable. So all of these things that are based on the policies of various states will also impact our insurance rates. And then what also is happening is, depending upon where you are located in a state, and for us, unfortunately, being in the state of Washington and also in King County, we have very generous juries on plaintiff cases, and they can lead to nuclear jury verdicts. So this is just a snapshot that is very general information provided through our insurance broker, but you can see up there in the top, on the right, the top $67 million verdict, $10 million verdicts, $60 million verdicts. All of that then increases our insurance rates as well. So the key on our liability insurance renewal is that our policy limits stay the same. So nothing changed there so much. but our premiums did decrease, and so they decreased by 6% from last year. So they are $155,000 less than our premium for 2025. If we were to stay with the same insurer that we had in 2025 for 2026, our insurance rates would have gone up by $426,000. That is for the exact same coverage with the exact same insurers that we had in 2025. That's a huge amount. And so we started to look at what are our options. Can we go to another market? Can we find another insurer to try to save some money there? So we did, and I'll get to the good news on that too. It also then increased our first layer of insurance. So what you'll see on the towers, and some of you are familiar with our liability or our insurance towers, but the first level previously was at $5 million. We've now increased that to $7 million with the first layer of insurance. And so that is also locked in for 26 and 27. We before have not had these insurance rate locked for more than a single year. So we are guaranteed that first level will stay at the same rate that we pay in 2026 and 2027. We also kept our self-insured retention, which is similar to a deductible, but we kept that at the same for most of our claims, but we did decrease it in others, and I'll get into that detail on the next screen. So this is a lot of information. And so Councilmember Shoker, this is going to be all new for you. But how insurance used to work in the past, we used to have a couple of insurers that we could go to get the full $25 million coverage that we need or to give us that protection. The market is getting harder and harder to secure that level of coverage, and so we've had to piecemeal it together through different insurers. And so some insurers will come in and they'll insure for the first $5 million, then we'll get another insurer that will cover the next $5 million, and so on and so on. And so each of those colors that you see there show over time the layers of coverage that we've gotten. So where we are now is the very far right. And so what I have circled are just things that I want to draw your attention to. So if you go to the tower on the very far left for 2025, it shows our total cost was $2.4 million for $25 million worth of coverage. That is with the same insurers that is in that middle tower there. That's if we were to keep it the same. That would have increased to $2.7 million for that very same coverage. So an additional cost there of $270,000. So now by moving over to where we are on the far right, by changing that base layer of insurance, so now no longer are we with Safety National for that first $7 million. We are now with Metis Obsidian. We saved a significant amount of money there. We also were able to then lower our self-insured retention for our non-general liability and non-law enforcement cases to $1.5 million. It previously was at $1.625 million. And so those decisions were made in consultation with our finance department. One piece of having a self-insured coverage with this high self-insured retention is there are actuarial studies that are done that tell us or help inform us on how much money we have to set aside in the budget to make sure that we can meet our self-insured obligations. So in talking through with finance, it was best for us to try to do what we can to maintain or reduce our self-insured retention rate. So in addition to that, we also were able to save some significant money, so that was good. So you'll see where the circles are, though, that shows where the changes are. So the self-insured retention reduced on the far right there. Our first layer moved up from $5 million to $7 million with Metis. Then the next layer from $7 million to $10 million is now with a new provider as well. And then way at the top from the $20 million to $25 million coverage, that's with a new provider as well. But all told, that saves us a significant amount of money for 26, and then also we're guaranteed, that same rate on that first $7 million in 27. Now the amount between the $7 million to 25 that could change. That is not locked in for 2027. But the rate that we pay on that first layer also informs the rates we pay on the higher one. So if we pay a lower rate on that first level of $7 million, we're going to pay lesser on those higher amounts than we would otherwise.
A quick question, Mayor. Question, please. Just to be sure. So these are layers, right? So let's say if something happened and it costs $6 million, whatever. So the first two layer, that's where we'll take care of the cost, right?
The first $2.5 million, yes, we would cover.
Up, and then if it's over $15 million, then it goes up to the.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So each one will chip in.
Gotcha. Okay.
In my experience, I've not been familiar with us getting up into our second or third layers, at least definitely within the past 5 years. Prior to me even being an attorney, I haven't heard of significant awards that got us above that, but we have that protection. There have been judgments in other cities that have been significant. We do try to administer our liability program with an eye on the total dollar amount. Is it better to resolve this case? Are we going to pay less if we resolve it, even if we don't think that there was anything that was done wrong or inappropriately? Sometimes there's that business decision of it's going to be cheaper for us to somehow deal with this case now as opposed to spending $1.5 million up to trial and appeals and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of discussion that happens when we do have a significant claim about what's in the best interest financially on how to deal with it.
That's probably why the first top 4 layers down haven't changed too much, because you haven't had opportunity to really dive into it, would be my guess.
Exactly. And then when we do have claims, this is a part I didn't know until I started to administer this program, is that they adjust those for inflationary costs. So they look at our past claim history. So say we settled a claim 3 years ago for $1 million. They will look at that claim in today's dollars as to how much would we have to spend for that same million back, 5 years ago, what would that cost today? And that is then what they base future rates on. So it's a whole mathematical equation. We have lots of folks smarter than me helping with the actuarial reports and forecasting, but there is a lot of discussion and research that goes into helping make those decisions.
Okay.
So this just kind of shows, Councilmember Shoker, this will be helpful for you too, to sort of see the history of our self-insured retention. And how it's gone up over the years. And it has increased significantly to help control costs because it is just getting so costly to secure that insurance. But there are trickle-down effects to that with budgeting. And so that is why, in consultation with our finance department, we really wanted to do what we could to keep our self-insured retention rate where it was or drop it down. The best that we were able to do was to drop down the all other claims from 1.625 million to 1.5 million. So there's a little bit there. And the hope is that we can continue to try to work on that maybe in future years. The one part before I get back into the next type of coverage, I wanted to let you know that what my plan is for this year is we've been on this self-insured program for a while now, so we have some data about what it's costing us. What I would like to do is now look at some of the risk pools, which is where we've been in the past. It was several years ago when we used to be with WCIA. We changed and then went and became fully self-insured separately by working with a conglomerate of other agencies to buy insurance out in the open market. I want to go back to the risk pool and just see what would it cost if we were to look to make a change and join, whether it's WCIA, CIAW, or some other risk pools that might be out there, so we can have the benefit of that financial information to weigh it against what we've been paying and see, is it time to maybe make a change and consider a risk pool again. So more to come on that, but wanted you to know that we're at least looking at what other ways can we try to save some money in the insurance market. So excess workers' compensation. So this is when an employee is injured on the job and they are unable to work. And so workers' compensation will cover their lost wages, so time loss, if they need to seek medical treatment, so getting that medical treatment, if they are no longer able to do their work and they need vocational counseling and training to now become qualified for another job. All of that comes from workers' compensation. We have this excess workers' compensation coverage that helps us kind of meet all of those costs because it is very expensive. So what our policy provides for currently is that, again, we have another SIR, so self-insured retention, much like a deductible. For law enforcement, because it is so costly, that rate is higher. It's $1 million that we have to meet on each workers' compensation claim before insurance would kick in. All other employees, so myself, would be at the $600,000 self-insured retention rate. And again, that is on a per employee basis, so per injury. And then the coverage we have is everything that the statute requires that we cover, so essentially unlimited. But we are then accountable for that first million or that first 600,000, depending upon the employee's job. That premium did increase slightly. It increased 12% over last year, so it's about an additional $22,000. We could have saved some money had we switched our SIR rate and gone up a little bit more, but again, in consultation with our finance department, it made sense for the city long-term to keep our SIR where it is and just deal and pay that additional premium cost. So we did pay slightly more for this coverage, but our SIR remains the same, and given at least what I've seen since we've been involved more with workers' comp, that's a good move. Our claims are getting more expensive. It's policy decisions that our state has made. There's some presumptive claims now where employees are presumed to have certain conditions that they can then have a workers' compensation claim, and that gets very costly. So maintaining our SIR where it is a good move.
So let's go through the state, or do you have a third party like Segwick that you go?
The insurance coverage? No, we have insurance, I can't remember the name of I think it's I thought I had it
okay.
up there. Oh, no, it's with Safety National, there we go.
Okay.
So yes, we are with a insurer, Safety National, and then we have a third-party administrator that helps us manage and administrate those workers' compensation claims. For the city, it's primarily done by our benefits division, and then when we get to the point of appeals and court action, our office is looped in with outside counsel to assist with evaluating those claims.
Okay.
And cyber liability, this is one where it decreased again, so we saved an additional $9,000. This is, we renewed our existing coverage, it's for $3 million, it's through Homeland Insurance Company. Our SIR remains the same at $100,000. We have a total coverage of $3 million, but we did decrease that one by 11.6, due in large part to all of the preventative and safety measures that our IT department has put into place. And we have not had any significant breach of our data or our systems. So all good news, and all of that helps with our insurance rates.
Awesome.
So in total, we saved a lot of money, which is great. Our savings will continue, as I mentioned, in 2027 for that first layer of the general liability coverage, and we are going to continue in the law department to do what we can to see what else is out there in the market and are other ways that we can continue to save money. Are there any more questions for me?
Good job.
Any questions or comments? Good job, Tammy and team. Thank you.
Well,
All right. Thank you, Tammy. All right, next up, we have James Endicott, our IT Director. King County INET Amendment Number 3, authorize and ratify. So we'll have action item here. Welcome.
So this is first presentation of the director.
John Rhymes.
Well, in that fashion, so James Endicott, IT Director, in that fashion, I'm going to pass this on to John.
Well, you learn quick on the job, don't you?
Mike taught me a lot, I say.
Mike taught you well.
I want to turn this over to John Rhymes. He's our Network Operations Manager.
Hey, James. Hi, everyone. I'm John, Network Engineering Manager for IT, and we are here requesting approval to extend the King County INET contract. King County INET provides things like internet access for the city, for the bulk of the locations in the city, our public addressing scheme out there, we have a Class C address with them, access to intergovernmental network for things like PD and things like that, and Valleycom access and some other services as well. We're seeking approval for a third amendment to extend services through December 31st of 2027, and that cost will be $137,494. Are there any questions I can answer about?
Do we have any questions or comments for John?
Okay.
All right, none. I'll make a motion. I move to authorize the mayor to sign amendment number 3 to extend the King County INET services contract through December 31, 2027, subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the IT director and city attorney, and to ratify past actions consistent with this motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Good job, James.
All right, next up, we have Brian here, Brian Rambunga, amendment to consultant services with Robert Half International Inc. Welcome.
Thank you. Afternoon, Council. Brian Rambunga, PMO Manager in your IT department. Today, we're requesting authorization to sign amendment number 7 to our staffing services agreement with Robert Half International. This agreement is used to bring in temporary IT resources as needed to support city technology work, operationally and from a capital perspective, and really just to maintain continuity on critical technology IT initiatives. This cost increase should not exceed $182,000, which is already included within IT's 2025-2026 operating and capital budget. And it is also part of a bucket used by multiple agencies that were contracted with, like Protingent, which we had sought approval for at the beginning of this biennium. And as always, we'll continue to monitor total staffing agency spend to ensure that it remains within council-approved amounts. That's it for my brief presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions or comments for Brian? If none, I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move to authorize the mayor to sign amendment number 7 to the consultant services agreement with Robert Half International Inc., subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the Information Technology Department Director and City Attorney.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, now I'll hand it over to our Councilmember Larmer for Economic and Community Development.
Thank you, Council President. So tonight we're going to hear from Caroline Eckel with a consultant services agreement with Terracon Inc. for 2024 EPA Brownfields Community-Wide Assessment Grant. Hi, Caroline.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Caroline Eckel from ECD. We are here to request authorization for a contract to work with Terracon Inc. In the implementation of our 2024 EPA Brownfields Community-Wide Assessment Grant. Council previously accepted a $500,000 grant from the EPA, and through a competitive RFP process, we selected Terracon to assist with us moving this work forward. The ultimate purpose for this grant is to allow us to assess properties across the city in certain targeted locations that may be contaminated, to determine whether or not contamination exists, and to make plans for the cleanup and reuse of those properties. This ultimately helps us facilitate the kind of repurposing and redevelopment of properties that are otherwise neglected or abandoned, or more difficult to reuse because there's an uncertainty about whether they're contaminated. And so we're excited to be moving this work forward to see some outcomes from this. We hope to see expansion of economic growth, to create safer conditions in terms of public health, and overall just to improve the overall quality of our built environment throughout the city. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Caroline? Okay, I do have one. So I noticed that, so we received a $500,000 grant.
Yes.
The agreement is about 61,000 shy of that. Do we have plans for that 61?
Yes. So a portion of that is going toward staff time to help implement and administer the grant as well, because we collaborate with those consultants on that work. So it reimburses the city for a portion of our administrative time. And then we also are working with some community organizations as well with our community outreach efforts, and so some of those funds will go toward that. So there's a little bit of a parceling of some of the funds. That it also allows us to participate with other communities. Their EPA has multiple conferences that help us understand how the grants can be effectively used. So it might allow for some educational opportunities as well, so that we can make sure that we're following best practices with the use of our grant.
Right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
This is one of the best grants to have because we don't have to provide a match. So they're actually paying city staff to do this work, which means we have salary savings or other opportunities. So that's why we're reserving a portion back, because we can do that as part of this grant.
Right. Sounds great. Any other questions? All right, great. I will read the motion then. I move to authorize the mayor to sign a consultant services agreement with Terracon Inc., subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the Economic and Community Development Director and the city attorney.
Second?
I have a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Caroline. And back over to you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Larmer. Now we have Parks, Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Madam President. We have 3 action items tonight, and up first we have Rhonda to talk about the 2026 through 2030 art plan. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. I'm Rhonda Billerbeck, the Cultural Programs Manager for the city within the Parks Department, and I am excited to be here today to share the 2026 to 2030 City Art Plan. This funding is generated through the city's $2 per capita ordinance for public art. That ordinance was passed in 1985, putting us as one of the early on communities certainly in Washington State and across the nation to have a funding mechanism for making sure we have public art available to our community. So each year we lay out how we're going to use that money for you all. So that's what I'll be doing today. So our account balance was just shy of $700,000 at the beginning of this year. For 2026, we'll pull about $189,000 out of that in administrative expenses. So our total 2026 expenditures are slated to be about $884,000. The ordinance generates about $280,000 a year based on our $2 per our population. So what happens is after the administrative expenses come out at the end of each year, whatever's left over gets transferred into our project account to be used for projects in the coming years. And just to clarify, a lot of times people, when I talk about this, people think it's a tax. It's not a tax. It's just basically $2 for every person in the population gets pulled out of the general fund and transferred over to the project account. So this is, most of the projects that we have going on right now are projects that were approved out of the 2024 and 2025 art plan. So a lot of these things are ongoing and have been previously approved, but I thought I would just kind of give you a quick update on what's going on. We're still working on Garrison Creek. Artist Elizabeth Connor is working with city staff and Berger Partnership to create art for the remodel of that park. She is specifically focused on some new sculptures that'll go at several points throughout the park using a leaf concept. She'll be designing some play tiles in the playground area and then also focusing on some artwork for the chain link fence between the play area and the parking lot. Another ongoing project is the East Hill North Community Park. We have artist Vaughn Bell is on board working with Site Workshop, the landscape architects on this project, to develop artwork. She has designed some seating walls that feature artist designed ceramic tiles. There's just going to be another very cool seating that I'm excited about. It's like a nest concept to kind of tie into all the birds and bird watching at this site. So it's kind of just for resting, relaxing, and listening to the meadow. And she's also going to be working on a shade screen and some more artwork in the seating area of the overlook. This is an ongoing project. The newly revitalized Springwood Park. We have an artist team working on this. They have proposed 2 bench structures. You can tell from that little rendering that they're kind of semicircles. There's a bigger one and a smaller one. And we just had a really exciting community outreach event on January 17th at the park. And we were going to be excited if we got a couple dozen people to come out. We had almost 70 people. Councilmember Michaud was there briefly, and we had a lot of people that were very excited about this project and excited to share their input. So that'll be installed later this year. We have an artist, David Eaton, contracted to work on the Upland Spray Park. This is really early in the process, so he is just getting on board and getting going on that. This is a new allocation of money. This is our downtown rotating mural project. We have 2 sites in downtown Kent at 403 West Meeker and 314 West Meeker. The idea with this project is that every 2 or 3 years we commission 2 artists to design new murals that are printed on vinyl wraps and affixed to aluminum panels on these walls downtown. And so we are planning to get some new art for this year, for 2026. And then, of course, our very, very popular utility box art wrap program. This is always a fan favorite. People in the community love this project. We commission artists to design artwork also on vinyl that gets wrapped around the utility boxes, and it really has done a lot to prevent graffiti on the boxes. And if there is graffiti on the boxes, it's very easy to clean off. So it's been a win-win all the way around. So we're planning on probably adding about 8 new boxes to the inventory in 2026. And then the other new allocation is $44,742 for collection maintenance. Like I said, we've been doing this since 1985, so our collection is, of course, always aging, and it takes funding to maintain it. The totem pole in this picture, as you probably know, is at the old fishing hole, and you could barely just see the tip top of it during our recent flooding. So I think we're going to have some work to do to restore that, and perhaps a couple of other pieces of art. This pot of money will also come in handy as we consider the move to the ASB building. As you probably know, there are a number of artworks that are integrated within this building and within this campus that we will need to kind of address how to either deaccession them or move them or save them somehow. And then we also always like to leave a chunk of money in our opportunity fund that will just be carried over from the 2025 plan. That money is helpful if projects come up that are great opportunities that we want to make sure we get art in, or any kind of things that we need to make kind of last minute decisions about. And then, of course, for the rest of the 5-year plan, it gets a lot more vague, but just to kind of show what we're anticipating over the next 4 years, 27 to 2030, we generally have money just earmarked for some capital projects, and then, of course, maintenance and things like that. We're hoping to do some art in the Kearsarge Park expansion in the future, perhaps at Campus Park, Mill Creek Canyon Trails. Of course, continuing our traffic signal control boxes and murals and those projects as well. That's the plan. Yes.
Councilmember Boyce?
Thank you. Hey, Rhonda, on the Upland plan, I mean, I've driven by there a lot. There's a lot of activity around there. Have you guys thought about just what that long-term plan is going to look like with all the activity around there?
For Uplands, the spray park?
Yeah.
I mean, in relation to the art, I'm not sure. As far as the artist that we've contracted, he's working with Parks Planning.
I'm talking about the environment that is around that area, though.
Oh, yeah, I would defer to maybe Julie or
Julie.
I don't know, Julie. I'm just working on.
I know. I totally get it, and I appreciate that.
It's going to be a really cool sculpture. I can tell you that.
Hi, everybody. Julie Pierce, Canola Parks Director. We can actually come at some point and give you a sneak peek of some of the planning ideas we're starting out there. I think we do know the area and what's happening in the area, obviously, and it's just important to remember when you bring in positive use, it does drive out negative use. So there's going to have so much activity. It's going to be the first water feature we have in the city. So we are anticipating it's going to be good, but we are tracking all of that, making sure we're looking at design standards that will help with some of that demand for sure.
We're going to make sure the water bottle is sprayed deep.
Right, we'll just spray.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We will definitely, So we will definitely follow up on that.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Troutner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rhonda, I think you already answered this, but it is a significant carryover. But that's because we are saving it for a lot of these projects.
The opportunity fund part specifically?
The account balance.
Yeah, it's
because we're
saving.
carrying it. Because if I'm looking at the years where we've projected things, we're kind of balancing that out and having some of that spent down so that we can get these projects.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that you can see when you look at the plan is that over the next 5 years, it's diminishing. The account is diminishing. I know we've talked about this when I've come in years past, but the $2 per capita isn't growing a lot at this point, and we are now taking a significant amount of salary and benefits and administrative expenses out of this project funding that used to just be for projects. And so every time we get a cost of living increase, which is great for us as staff, but it definitely then cuts into that amount that we have for projects. So yeah, that amount is big because we have, like 7 active projects that we have contracts on for that money, and it just hasn't been paid out yet.
Well, you've done a great job. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Larmer?
Yeah, Rhonda, I'm curious, on the signal control boxes, will be up to 47. How many do we have throughout the city?
We have about, I know that, I can tell you exactly, I can email you one if I look at our inventory, but I want to say we're getting up in the 50s. Maybe we started in 2040 or 50 some boxes.
Okay, so we're getting close to having them on all boxes, is that?
I think there's quite a few left still, and what has happened is our Public Works Department, they replace the boxes every so often too. So I think we committed to keep the wraps on each box for about 5 years. That's like in the artist contract. Because when we started, we weren't sure how long they were going to last. They last amazingly well. You know, some that we did the very first year in 2017 still look great. So we haven't really had to replace them just based on wear and tear. There have been a couple boxes that have been hit by cars, or, you know, they've had to be replaced for those reasons, or the specs on the boxes change. So Public Works is constantly rotating boxes out, so we always have a fresh batch. But yeah, I think at some point we'll probably start to, you know, maybe not do 8 more every year, but just trade out ones that need updating.
Awesome, thank you.
Did you want to add anything?
Councilor Michaud. Councilor Boyd has a question.
Just for context, we have about 120 of those boxes total.
Oh, so yeah, we're doing pretty good. Okay, Councilmember Boyd?
Okay. Hey, hello, Rhonda. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. So is this saying here that we're going to add 8 new boxes at a cost of $40,000? Okay, that's expensive for a box then.
Yeah, so that covers the artist fee, the fabrication. So we work with a sign company to fabricate the vinyl wraps themselves, and then also the installation to come out and install them. So it really depends on every year what size the boxes are. As you drive around the city, you might notice some of the boxes are pretty small, and it's just like one box. Those might cost more like $2,000. Okay. And then some of the boxes are big, and they have the backup boxes that go with them. So they're like 2 or 3 boxes that the artist designs art for all 3. And so then obviously the installation and fabrication costs go up pretty significantly on those.
Okay, thank you.
And we do need to pay the artists for their design and time and all of that. Council President?
Thank you, Councilor Michaud. Thank you, Rhonda. It's always great to see you. Thank you for the presentation and this plan. And I love seeing all the boxes around the city and love seeing all the creative art that we have in our city. And now we're starting to see them in our neighboring cities. So it's amazing how much art is, you know, kind of visible to our eyes now. So I love seeing that, and my kids pointing out when they see something new. So thank you for that. But on the plan, I only see our boxes until 2028, and I don't see them in the future 2 years.
The plan is to do them every other year. That's kind of been our plan going forward.
I don't see them in 2030 either, so I thought maybe we were done.
Probably just was an oversight of mine as I projected out that far. So yeah, I imagine if we're still going strong with that program, we would certainly keep doing them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Rhonda? Okay, I will read the motion. I move to approve the 2026 through 2030 City Art Plan and authorize the mayor to sign all documents necessary to implement the art plan within established budgets subject to terms and conditions acceptable to the Parks Director and City Attorney.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you.
Great work, Rhonda. Thank you. All right, up next, we have Marina Hansen here to present the Community Development Block Grant 2026 Annual Action Plan and Contracts.
Thank you. Good evening. Normally, Brittany Gaines on my staff would be here to present the annual action plan to you, but unfortunately, like many city staff, she is home unwell today. The City of Kent is an entitlement city with HUD, and along with being an entitlement city comes a series of plans and procedures that we have to follow in order to receive our funding. So we do bring the annual action plan to you every year around this time. And essentially what it does is it sets out where we intend to invest the city's block grant funds. Also, along with HUD funding comes some pretty specific categories that we have to invest those funds in. And so we're generally focusing City of Kent funds into maintaining housing, suitable living environments, and economic opportunities, so job training and employment. And that's what we're doing this year as well. You'll see in the annual action plan, we have laid out the programs that we'll be funding with the CDBG funds this year. And so we set those performance measures, and then we come back to you after the year is done to talk about the CAPER, which outlines the outcomes. So it's something that we do every year. We tell you what we're going to do with the funds, and then we come back and tell you how we did with the funds. So it's, if you want to talk through any of the programs that we're funding, I'll just be really quick. We're funding the Sacred Heart Shelter, Multi-Service Center Shelter, Catherine's House, which is transitional housing, the YWCA Anita Vista Housing, which is for domestic violence survivors and their families, and then Partners in Employment for their employment training. So those are the funding categories with our public service dollars, and then we also invest in our city's home repair program. And then we put the allowed amount into our administration for our planning purposes and staff. And that is really all there is to this plan. Again, we bring it every year. It's pretty boilerplate. If you look at the plan itself, it looks very clunky. It wouldn't be how I would want to present any of the information, but we have to stay within the HUD's prescribed template.
Right, and like Marina said, it's a federal grant, so there are strict requirements and reporting, and you have staff that monitor to make sure everything is being done, that we are, giving money to them and making sure they're doing a good job.
Yes, correct.
Any questions? Councilmember Boyce?
Everything is going on at the federal level, so you still feel pretty good about the allocation that may or may not come?
Yeah, we've been tracking it very closely. The good thing about CDBG funding is that it is supported on a bipartisan level. So it is often not included in the budget, but because there is support for the program on both sides of the House, it usually ends up being, it finds its way back into the budget, which is what has happened recently. And of course, there's still some things going on that we're monitoring in terms of the spending bill, but it looks like it has been fully funded for 2026 once everything gets nailed. And that's the other interesting thing with bringing you the annual action plan now. We don't have our 2026 actual figure, so we are basing it on our last year's amount. That's all we can do. So it's a little awkward timing-wise, but somehow we always manage to work it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Council President, did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? All right, I will read the motion. I move to approve the Community Development Block Grant 2026 Annual Action Plan, including funding allocations and contingency plans, and authorize the mayor to sign all documents necessary to receive the federal grant and the community services and resources identified in the action plan, subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the Parks Director and City Attorney.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, Marina, on to the next thing. You were going to talk to us about funding of some affordable housing projects in South King County.
Correct. So tonight we're going to talk through the SCIP Housing Capital Fund, and this is again something that we bring to you every year. And essentially, if you recall, the council pools funds with SCIP, and that's our 1406 funds, which we've been pooling with SCIP since 2019, and also our House Bill 1590 funds, which we've been pooling since 2020. So one of those is a recaptured sale tax, and the other one is a 0.1% tax that we enacted and kept local control of, but then council chose to pool those funds with SCIP for developing affordable housing in South King County. The other cities that did not choose to keep the local control, all of their funds go to the healthy housing program that the county administers. So the way that the Housing Capital Fund application process works is SCIP opens it. The advisory board for SCIP is who does the initial review of all the applications. They develop those recommendations. They take them to the SCIP executive board. Mayor Ralph is still the vice president of the SCIP executive board, so she votes on it at that level. And once the executive board has approved who they want to channel the funds through, then, this is the fun part, even though we've all pooled our funds, it goes back to every single one of the 11 cities that pools funds for council to allocate those dollars to the projects. So that's why I'm here tonight instead of Claire, who's the executive manager of SCIP, because they do have to go to 11 separate city councils to get that approved individually. So in your packet, you will see the projects that are recommended for 2026. There are no Kent projects this year recommended. There's a project in SeaTac, a project in Renton, and a project in Federal Way. They're in your packet. I'm happy to talk through them if you want to. If there was a Kent project, we would probably spend a lot more time on it. But just as a reminder, you know, we look for some amount of geographic distribution in where we fund the projects, but ultimately the goal of SCIP is to advance affordable housing in South King County in general. So hopefully we'll see a Kent project next year, but these are the three that are being recommended currently.
Marina, were there any applicants for Kent projects?
So there was an application for a project in Kent, and it was more a remodel preservation type project, and it did score fairly highly, but not high enough, unfortunately. So hopefully they'll just bring it back through the next cycle next year.
Any other questions for Marina? Councilmember Boyce?
Do you know the dollar value that Kent had contributed since day one?
I think that
Give and take.
Kent is the significant contributor because we pool our 1590 funds and we have more than any of the other South King County cities. So I think we've pooled around 10 million.
Yeah.
And then we've had 2 projects. Kristen's here. I added her as a presenter because she always has to back me up on the questions part. She's a little more.
Yes, so we have, it's just under 10 million that Kent has contributed. We also are the largest by population size city for South King County for contributions. We've had 2 projects that have been funded. Neither one is fully developed yet. They are either underdeveloped, and 3 awards. So 3 awards to 2 projects. So in the last 3 funding cycles, we have had funds go to Kent projects. So this one we did not. That was a preservation project. It also had a couple different moving pieces in it that we're hoping that they'll reapply next year.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilmember Boyd?
I think Kristen answered my question because I was wondering, since 2019, how many projects were actually completed or started on in the city of Kent? And I think, go ahead.
So the awards did not start in 2019 because we needed to build up a fund, and then there were also, this was pre my time, but there was also determination within SCIP of how to administer this fund, because if we were to do it on our own, that would eat through a significant portion of the funds. And so the idea was, let's share the administrative cost. So I believe there's not been funds since 2019. Correct. I'm not aware of any projects that have opened yet, because the time between when the projects are under their permitting phase and when they're getting their financing, sometimes they overlap, sometimes they get a little bit of the financing first from SCIP, and then they're still going down the permitting phase. So we don't have the exact numbers. We can look back and see how many units have been funded. Also, the funding, we're one small piece of many layers of funding for projects, so we can say in total this many units, but we can't claim credit for entirely funding all of those projects.
Okay, thank you, Kristen.
Yes, many times these projects are, like $100 million, and so our $1 million doesn't cover a whole lot. So I do have a question about that. What if they don't get this other funding? Then what happens?
Either one of us can probably correct it, but yeah, there's a timeline attached to the funding, and so if it gets to the point where a project is not going to happen, then those funds would be returned to the capital fund and reallocated to other projects.
Okay.
Is it 36 months? You might.
I
think I
read that.
It's probably in the packet.
Yeah, it
somewhere.
is. Councilmember Larmer?
Yeah, so the 2 projects in Kent, do we know how close they are to the funding or how much?
So one of the projects is under construction, starting to break ground and see they're fully funded is a hard term because there's always surprises that come up. The other project we've entitled and issued, we're ready to issue permits. They haven't picked them up yet, but they have run into greater funding challenges. And so that project, they've had a couple of redesigns and other conversations. That is one that we're continuing to talk with them and see. They had some assumptions that other funders would be contributing significantly, and then Amazon specifically and some of the other non-state funding groups changed priorities and geographic areas, and so what they were counting on when we originally issued the funding versus where those outside organizations have shifted their focus is something that they're working through right now.
What were the costs on those two? And Kent, do you recall the total development cost?
Just a moment. You guys are gonna make me put my glasses on.
Sorry.
Okay, so Mercy Housing received a $1 million grant from SCIP, and I think this is TWG has received.
They were closer to 1 point.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, it's almost 1.2 over, or yeah, almost 2 million over 2 separate funding rounds. And that's the one that Kristen was talking about, is having the greater challenges of getting their project fully funded. So TBD.
Thank you.
Are you good, Councilmember Larmer?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. I will read the motion. I move to adopt resolution number 2101, authorizing the execution of agreements by the administering agency for South King Housing and Homelessness Partners to fund affordable housing projects.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Back to you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Michaud. With that, we are at the end of our meeting, and we'll be back for council workshop at 5:15. We're adjourned. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to Kent City Council Workshop for Tuesday, February 3, 2026. We have one item on our agenda, and that's addressing homelessness. And we have Normandy Park Mayor Eric Zimmerman here to give us the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Council members. I'm not sure if we'll have the mayor, but if Dana is able to drop in, then it'll be great to have her be a part of this conversation too. Is the microphone working, by the way? Can you hear me okay? I want to acknowledge it's unusual that a mayor of another city comes and talks with you about a problem that you're experiencing in your city that we're not particularly experiencing in ours. And I just want to call out that dynamic. It's unusual. But what brings me here is actually that for the last couple of decades, I've been in a career in international development, working with host governments to design and implement and study national poverty systems with some of the largest projects that address poverty in the world. Over the last year, I stepped back from that career to respond to friends and others in politics who asked for technical support in understanding homelessness in the way that we would have studied it at USAID or at the United Nations, to apply the methods and the data analysis techniques that we would use to understand any large international problem. And so I've spent about 12 months doing that. I've been teaming up with some folks inside government, some folks outside government, but largely a lot of the work has been my own. And I've been creating resources that are for people in government, not to tell you what to do, but to give you information and help you understand from a broader perspective what do we see in data. You know your issues better than anyone, and you don't need outside folks telling you how to run Kent. But I hope today that at least I can share with you some of the information that we've gathered that helps us understand what is happening in Washington, the big picture, and hopefully gives you information where, as a council, it'll support the process you have of designing policy, the response to local problems. The data that we're going to be talking about isn't data that I collected. The data has been collected by federal researchers using collection methods and programs that have decades of track record, very rigorous, very proven. These are not crystal ball methods, though. We can understand at a population level, what's happening, how many people are living in poverty, or how many people have told the federal government that they're earning $6,000 versus $60,000. We can understand these things, but it's not going to tell you the story of any individual as to what's happened in their life and what's led them to a point of crisis. But it is helpful for us to understand where large groups of people exist in a state of risk, states of risk that we know correspond to a possible pathway into homelessness at a future point. So that's a bit what we're going to talk about. The thing that I would remind you of when we're looking at this data is, though we'll be looking at people who are living in homelessness, experiencing homelessness, people who are adjacent to experiencing homelessness, at a point that's very close to homelessness. We're really looking at large groups of people. Again, it's not telling a story of any individual, but it's important for us to know that if there's a group of 60,000 people or 30,000 households that are at a point where we can see in data that they're very, very near to homelessness in 2024, 2023, 2022, we can connect the dots on some of those things by then comparing that group to what happens with homelessness in the next year. And that's a lot of what we're going to be doing. But stop me at any point. This is a conversation. Again, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not even particularly all that smart, but I will try to answer your questions as best I can, and also look forward to hearing your own feedback and your own thoughts and your own wisdom. With that said, one of the things that has bothered me about homelessness discussion in politics is there's a temptation as an elected person to make it about one thing. To say that, well, we know for sure that it's housing affordability that causes homelessness, or that it's drug use that causes homelessness, mental illness that causes homelessness. And none of these answers are actually the right answer, because we know that homelessness has more than one root cause, and decades of research has evidence that it has more than one root cause. But the reason that we want to talk about root causes tonight is not to give you answers, but to acknowledge that whatever prevention work you want to do as a council, as a city government, it really does need to target the roots. Once something has happened, it's really hard to respond to fixing that thing. When someone becomes, experiences homelessness, the work to help them recover housing and return to a point of self-sufficiency is a lot harder than if we prevented the onset of homelessness in the first place. And so we'll be talking a bit about the common themes that researchers have found correspond to homelessness. One of the leading things that has been found in research over the last couple years, very large national studies by some of the country's best researchers, have found that resource exhaustion is the number one theme. Whether it's an expensive market, whether it's a cheap market, whatever else is going on, people have reached a point of resource exhaustion. In fact, some of the studies that have been done have found that that is a universal condition for everyone experiencing homelessness, is that they first experienced exhaustion of resources, social resources, monetary resources, employment resources. We'll also be talking about life shocks, acknowledging that some people they lose housing because something has happened in their life, disability, medical bills that they couldn't keep up with, domestic violence that someone's fleeing from. Behavioral health is something that hasn't been talked about enough in Washington, I think, but we'll be talking a bit more about that. Cost of living, it's just true. Cost of living does correspond with homelessness. But then we've also found that certain states and metros seem to have higher homelessness than others, and that doesn't follow that list of things that I just mentioned. There are places that have high rates of homelessness and a low cost of living. There are places with a high cost of living, very high cost of living, and low rates of homelessness. And so there's some discussion to have on that too. One of the things I think that's important to emphasize, at least I'll emphasize, is that if we look at these themes, there isn't a solution that fits all of them. And there's a temptation in government, I think, to have a one-size-fits-all solution or to put all public resources invested in one direction. But what you're going to do in that type of approach or that strategy is create bottlenecks, where because you've only addressed one part of someone's challenge set that they have, but there's 2 or 3 other things that you haven't addressed, they're going to remain in a state of homelessness until those other things are addressed as well. Moving on from that, the real question for us as we were doing this work over the last year was, if we acknowledge that we know what some of the common themes are, which ones are driving Washington's homelessness, and what amounts of Washington's homelessness can we attribute to the root causes that we've identified. Epidemiology is the approach that we used as a research team. That's the study of risks and causes across large populations of people. And one of the tools that we use is observation. You find all the data we can or develop data that helps us understand how many people are experiencing risks, significant risks, the risky risks, risks that we know usually then lead to causes and effects. Moving on from observation, then we try to estimate an attribution, which is really hard to do. But if we have identified that 200,000 people are experiencing a particularly significant risk and that number is growing, can we attribute a certain percentage of homelessness to that population of 200,000 people that are experiencing a particularly significant risk? I actually try not to do that because it's very risky to be the prophet in the oracle, declaring that this percentage of this is caused by that. But it is part of the practice of epidemiology is to try to make an attribution. So we at least do a little bit of it. I'll try to move more quickly. Homelessness in Washington has obviously grown a lot. But I want to start with chronic homelessness because this is a place where Washington is actually very significant. In 2014, we had about 2,500 people that we were counting. There were people we missed, but as a government, state government, we were counting about 2,500. And then by 2024, there's 13,000 people. Again, we missed many people, but we managed to count 13,000. That's an increase of 418%, which is a very, very significant increase. In the national context, that took us from number 6 to number 2. But at that same time, the percentage of people in Washington who were chronically homeless instead of not chronically homeless, we went from position 28 to position number 1. A lot of people in Department of Commerce and other parts of state government understood that this was happening, and that's why so much investment was made in the systems that respond to homelessness. But as you can see, by 2024, we didn't really manage to slow it. In fact, you can see from 2022 to 2024, it picked up quite a lot. And it's been getting worse instead of getting better, despite all of the investments we've made. So that's an important baseline to acknowledge. Point-in-time homelessness, this is actually ongoing right now in Washington. And this year, KCRHA will be producing numbers, so we can jump from our 2024 number to our 2026 number. But that went up by 71%. And in terms of the total number of people that we were counting, we went from 6 to 3 in terms of the national ranking. Now, when I think of Washington, I acknowledge we're a costly place, but we're a smaller state. It's hard to imagine that Washington has the second largest population of people experiencing chronic homelessness after California, and the third largest number of people experiencing homelessness in the country. It's difficult to think of our state in that way. But moving on, I want to talk about, sorry, go ahead.
This is a dialogue, right? So,
yeah,
okay.
Please.
So you talk about this, but have you looked at the dollars that have been spent in Washington State, to try to tackle this here, compared to some of the other places? I mean, that is a big jump, right? But I think Washington State is spending a lot of money. And do you feel like is the money being spent the right way, or if it's not solving the problem because they continue to spend and spend?
Yeah, that is a complex question. I think that the money has been spent on the right things, but I think that it hasn't been spent on all of the right things. And this goes back to, you can solve, if someone has 3 problems and you solve 1, are you really solving the problems? And I think this is where Washington has done a great job investing in housing, and Washington has not invested at the level that it's needed to in behavioral health and economic opportunities. And I think that's the biggest challenge I've seen for why has the $6 billion that we spent on homelessness not turned this trend line downwards. You can only get so far spending money only on housing. You got to spend money on other places.
It's like the three-legged stool, what you just described, right? I think one thing that we don't talk enough about is, there's jobs too, right? Is a part of that, right? So, someone need to get a house, but also they need to be able to get a job. And I think that's probably one area, in my opinion, that the state haven't done an adequate enough job to go along with that three-legged stool.
The paradoxical thing there, though, Councilmember, is unemployment is strongly down. Poverty is strongly down. We're talking, 30% down over 2014. And job growth has outpaced population growth. And so on paper, it looks like there's a lot of opportunity. And minimum wage is 71% higher than it was in 2014. Yeah. So we're doing great on paper, but something is not connecting.
And I know I'm not going to, there are lots of jobs out there. Lots of jobs, and I know certain organization, just can't seem to bring no people in for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And there's lots of opens and lots of opportunity.
We're going to talk about that too.
Okay.
Eric, can I just ask one quick question? The point in time, I know it's happening right now. I know years ago they did it differently. I think they almost do it, I don't know if it's done differently every year, trying to improve it. We used to go around and count people. There was a protocol. How do you feel about the accuracy of that based on the progression of how that works?
Yeah, the count is not very accurate. We've been trying to get better. Right there on the chart, you can see an example of not very accurate. The first big blue bump that you see, 2016, 2017, 2018, that's a result of methodological changes. They changed the way they were doing counting, and they overcorrected, and then they reverted. And so you see it shoot up because there was a sensitivity change that happened that probably overcounted. And then they dialed it back and it dropped back down. So there are methodology issues. And the PIT count, particularly point in time, chronic is easier to count because there's a lot more administrative contact. But point in time is really, really challenging. Of course, this is a common problem for all of the states. So when Washington's rank changes, it's still an important observation to make. Yeah. Other questions? So talking about risks, and I'll try to move more quickly. I feel like I'm going too slowly here. Let's start talking about housing costs because this is the primary complaint. A risk statement in epidemiology would be people become homeless when they can't afford rent. I think that's a valid statement. Rent has skyrocketed and wages can't keep up. Again, this is an understandable thing to say. But breaking that down, is it really rent? Rent has risen, but income has also risen. Minimum wage is up 71%, and that actually paces the median rent increase that you see statewide in that same time period. So it's really more that we're talking about rent's share of income. If rent's share of income is too great, then we can reasonably expect that affordability decreases and the risk of homelessness increases. So it's important to study this to understand, this is the case, the state's main thesis of homelessness is this is what's happening. But you need to make some observations to kind of validate that. And this is, I think, where the state maybe did that early on, maybe 10 years ago. But we have recalculated that and restudied it to have a more contemporary understanding. Has rent share of income become too large? And if that's the case, how large of a share has it become and among how many people? This is information we have, we can study. It's information we collect. What role does income play? Is it just rent, or is there also a problem with income? And then if people are experiencing this risk, is it really that many more people now than it used to be a decade ago? Also, very importantly, we have to understand, has this risk increased in similar ways and similar times as homelessness? If the risk is just a little bit greater, it's hard to say that that explains homelessness. If it's tremendously greater, it's easy to say that it explains homelessness. So this is something that we look at. This is King County's median monthly rents, and the source of the information is the U.S. Census Bureau. They have an annual survey that's sent out to every household in the state, and some of them return it, some of them don't. But as a respondent-driven survey, it has an extremely strong track record across all 50 U.S. states. And we can dig into it in careful and responsible ways to then look at the households in any given area. We've looked at King County. This is what has happened for rents. You can see that it's basically a stable increase countywide across all income bands. Council familiar with the AMI, AMI area median income. So 30% AMI is households that are living at or below 30% of the median income. You can actually see, because of government's intervention between 2016 and 2020, there was a plateau of rental prices amongst 30% AMI. And then you can see that jump up in 2020 as a result of inflation and the COVID crisis. But generally, it's stable. There is a larger increase in rents at 30% AMI than any other bracket. It's 85%. As it happens in King County, the adjusted kind of city-weighted minimum wage also rose 85%. But the increase that we're seeing in these rents is not a minor one. It's still a pretty steady track upwards, and that's not something that can be ignored. So really the significance of this is what happens to income, and that's what we'll look at next. Well, most incomes trend normally, and this was one of the first very significant findings that we made. You can look at the dotted green and blue lines. Those are all of the different income bands that are countywide. But then you can see something very strange happens at 0 to 30% AMI. And suddenly, you can see the intervention of minimum wage law starting to hit in 2016. And that category takes a very strong break upwards above trend, which is what should happen when you're investing in minimum wage laws. And then suddenly it collapses, the entire band. It really starts towards the end of 2019, but then into 2020, 2021. And that puts it at a point where it's far below the normal trajectory that it would have otherwise been on. And this, by the way, is a massive number of people. This is hundreds of thousands of households. And so we have to ask the question then of, well, what happened? Everybody generally behaves normally, and then something very dire happens in 30% and below AMI. Some other trends that I had mentioned, the statewide minimum wage. I apologize, I said 71%, it's 75%. The bottom 10% of wages over 2013 is 77% higher in 2024. The King County minimum wage, and this is weighted by cities, it does have a small error margin, but about 85% above where it was in 2024. Unemployment down 35%, poverty down 29%. This is just the context. So looking at the next band up, what happened if the people making minimum wage? This is 30 to 50% AMI. It's full-time minimum wage workers and a little bit above. Normal trending, and then again, the collapse pattern is there for 0 to 30. I'm going to jump ahead. Here's what's actually happening. It's not that their incomes are going down. It's that the people who are earning nearly zero income flood into that bracket. And you can see this happening right here. The red line that you're seeing is the number of households that are earning between 0 and 10% of area median income in a given year. And suddenly that population explodes out of nowhere. It begins in 2015 and surges upwards through 2023 before you finally see a modest recovery in 2024. It makes the entire 30% AMI income band look like income is collapsing. But it's not really that the income's collapsing, it's that people who are making almost no income as a proportion of that band are suddenly a much greater proportion. The red line to its peak is an almost tripling of the number of households in King County to 33,000 households with nearly zero income. And then again, a small recovery in 2024. This is a trend that's extremely significant for the possibility of homelessness because these households have a mathematical impossibility of making rent. The median income for this group of households is $6,000 a year. And in that circumstance, you cannot afford rent anywhere in Washington state. This is a moment where we connected with other researchers nationally. There was a very large study of 140,000 people experiencing homelessness that was done over a decade period by Dr. Bruce Meyer and Dr. Angela Weiss, and they found something similar. They found that people experiencing homelessness earned incomes of no greater than $10,000 a year in the decade either side of a homelessness event. California group we connected with, the California statewide study, which was done in 2023, CASPA. It's a groundbreaking study, it's an important one, but they found that on average there was a monthly income of under $1,000 a month in the months leading up to homelessness. And this was among a population of people whose rent was median $400 a month. $400 a month median in rents and $1,000 a month median income. So there's a massive income problem probably associated with homelessness right now on the West Coast. But it's difficult to explain. And so we have to look a little bit deeper to understand what's going on. Right here, this is another observation of the rent-income ratio we were just talking about. If rent is too big a proportion of income, then the risk of homelessness goes up. Well, you can look at this table, all of the income bands, and you can see what percentage of income is consumed by rent. 120%, 120%, and on down is, over here. It's actually gone down a little bit as people have gotten wealthier. Small increases at 80 to 120, 50 to 80, a not insignificant change for people earning minimum wage. That's a pinch that anyone's going to feel. But the dire change has happened in the households that are earning extremely, extremely low income and working at very low levels. And when you get to the point where you've got rent consuming 105% of your income, 94% of your income, 70% of your income, you cannot stay in housing. And the number of people this represents is tens of thousands of households across King County. 750% of income would have to be spent on rent for the 0 to 5% group. Now, this is a little bit statistically noisy when you have that fine of a slice, but directionally, those are the changes that we're seeing. And then the final table at the bottom is you see the number of households that are earning extremely low levels of income has now by 2024 doubled. And you look at the change of the number of households existing in 10 to 30%, and that's barely moved at all across a 10-year period. So the movement and the growth has all happened at the very bottom, households that are earning nearly zero income. So going back to epidemiology, when we try to imagine what we'd call a population attributable fraction, the PAF, for homelessness, we have to acknowledge this is a collection of households that exist in very, very close proximity to homelessness. Then there's a very, very large number of people that are stuck at that point. And it's not difficult to imagine that the flow from that group of households with very low income into homelessness is probably considerable. We can't say that that's where all homelessness is coming from, but if there's that many people existing that close to homelessness, we have to imagine that the back and forth between those groups is very large. I'll stop now again for questions as I've reached the end of the income and rent portion of it before we jump into something else.
Questions or comments?
I'm good.
This is a very interesting observation, so you can keep going, Mayor. Thank you.
So another possible risk, behavioral health, and it always bothers me again when people say, well, it's all the drugs, it's mental illness, it's drugs. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat myself. Maybe, but probably not. It's got to be more than one thing. But it's true to say addiction destroys lives and causes homelessness. Yes, for some people that's true. And it can be hard to hold down a job and pay rent when you're addicted. That can be true. It's not true for everyone, but it can be true. But then the logic of that is, high-risk substance use probably is likelier to cause exhaustion of monetary and social resources than if you weren't engaging in high-risk substance use. So we can understand why people would associate an increased risk of homelessness with high-risk substance use. But the observations are important. Has substance use risen in Washington? If it has it become riskier? And how many more people now are exposed to substance use than might have been a decade ago? But importantly, again, has this trend changed in similar ways and in similar times as homelessness? Because we've got to see that. We've got to see the time-ordered relationship where if homelessness shoots up 418%, you got to see a similar change here. We actually do. This is a table of metrics that are studied by the federal government, tracked on an annual basis across mental illness, behavioral health, substance use, and homelessness categories. And this was one of the first points in our study where we actually find a magnitude match of things among housed adults. A lot of these figures are adults in households, and that's how the survey gets to them. But in terms of mental illness, the total change is moderate. The percentage above national average is moderate, and the rank change, puts us at number 4. Okay, but that's nothing to ignore, but I don't think it explains homelessness. If you start moving on down into methamphetamine use, where we went from number 15 in 2014 to number 6 nationally, and that's a 238% change. This is all housed adults, 100% of housed adults being captured in that figure. Statewide, that would be 100,000 housed adults or 100,000 households that have reported methamphetamine use in the prior year. That's a significant risk pool because we know that the P2P methamphetamine that's proliferating these days is incredibly toxic and incredibly addictive. And so we can't ignore 100,000 housed adults telling us that they're using meth. I'm going to move on down into fatal overdoses because this is an important one. But in terms of the per capita fatal overdoses in Washington, this is a signal of two things. It's proliferation and its potency, but it signals both of those things. We became number 4 in the country. The surge that we experienced is unprecedented. It was actually the largest surge. No other state has increased fatal overdoses as much as Washington has in the 11 years that were studied. We are triple the national average in terms of the growth of fatal overdoses. When you then move down into the non-fatal overdoses, these are overdoses that are being captured administratively in hospital systems when someone ends up in an emergency department. We were number 7 in 2014 and we're number 1 in 2024. Fentanyl overdoses, we were number 10 and now we're number 1. And this was a 513% increase, which is 413% above the national average. When you look at non-fatal opioids, which includes fentanyl, but is an important one because some states only really track opioids, we're still number 1. We've been number 1 in fentanyl overdoses and opioid overdoses seen in emergency departments on a per 10,000 basis for the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024. The overall overdoses seen in emergency departments reached 1 in 100 total visits, statewide in 2024. The risk pool that these numbers are describing is very significant, spanning housed and unhoused adults. And when you then look and compare to the growth of pit candidate homelessness, the growth of chronic homelessness, you at least can see the magnitude match. Now, some of the overdoses are among people experiencing homelessness, half. Half of the overdoses are among housed adults. And it's important to acknowledge the dynamic affecting both housed and unhoused adults in Washington. I've already basically described what I have here, but it is very significant to see the kind of rank shift that Washington has experienced. In my career, I don't think I've seen a rank shift like this ever. And it's important for government to acknowledge that it's happened and for government to talk about what we need to do to change these numbers. Bill, go ahead.
I used to be good at math, but I still try. But you look at the population have anything to do with it. I think over the last 10 years, you probably had 1 million plus people that have moved into the state of Washington, right? So would that be a data point that also will be associated with that as well?
Yeah, that's where we do per capita. It's just per 100,000 to try to control for that, so that you can look at the whole country and say per 100,000 people, what is the rate? And that way you can get away from the population growth we've experienced. Some of those are total. I think a couple, it's chronically homeless total. That's not per capita. And then fatal overdoses. Actually, no, that's also just per capita. So.
Yeah, okay. I didn't see the per capita.
Eric, do you also think that some of our laws that we have in Washington State attribute to this, or do you study that at all?
Yes, that is a tricky question, and we did study that in considerable depth. I will give you a preview. Looking at a 50-state index and indexing all of the things that we can across all 50 states, looking at all of this information across all 50 states, where does homelessness exist at the highest levels? It's the states that combine a high cost of living with low barriers for drug proliferation. And that is apparently the recipe, or at least, I can't say the recipe. That's scientifically irresponsible. I can say it's the association that we observe.
Can you repeat that again? High cost of living to?
Where you have a high cost of living,
right,
and you have low barriers for drug proliferation.
Low barriers, okay. Okay.
And that's the policy piece that you're asking about. And Washington has, for I think good motivations. It was rooted in good motivations of trying to reduce disparate impacts and try to reduce the likelihood that someone's going to enter the criminal justice system and have their life affected by that. But perhaps in doing that very energetically, we and a number of other states, about 10 states, have overcorrected and created the conditions under which proliferation is too free.
Good point.
Eric, I just want to point out that these are only the non-fatal overdoses are only the ones that go to the ER.
Yeah, and that's from 2019 largely. Some of the data for that system, it's tracked by CDC, and it's got 45 participating states with an average participation rate of 90% of hospitals. But it's only been up and running across that number of states since 2019. And so, yes, that's end up in emergency departments, and that's the growth and the change 2019 to 2024. Fentanyl was a change of 2021 to 2024, so that change happened in just 4 years. Yeah.
Question, Mayor, or kind of observation as well. So this is percentages. Do you have the raw data or number of respondents? I think that would make a, I guess, not really a difference, but I guess would kind of tell a whole picture.
Sure.
And the other one would be possibly, like, with all the overdoses in Washington, did they improve the way they report, possibly in our health institutions? And I'm like, this surprises me that California and Oregon are doing better than Washington. So, just a few things, and I think, is it true that fentanyl reached 2016 was when it kind of started? I started hearing about it, or it's 2017-ish?
Yeah, these are great questions, Council President. I can start with the fentanyl one if you want.
Yes, please.
And I'm sorry, I feel like I really interrupted you. I'm too used to also being
No, go ahead.
at a council chair.
Continue on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fentanyl began spreading on the East Coast first in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and then started surging on the West Coast 2018 when it was able to be adapted into a pill form. And so, yeah, our numbers, it hit us in a big wave in about 2018, 2019. And you can see that in the data too. You asked the question though of are we better at capturing this data administratively? This is part of the importance of looking at 50 states because it can help even out those differences because some states will be good, some states will be bad. We are one of the states that's better at capturing this data. We're not the best, but we're one of the better ones. There are some states that aren't quite as good, but the differences in capture are not significant enough to explain the differences that you see here in the numbers. For example, the participating states who are in DOSIS, where you see the non-fatal overdoses, 90% of hospitals in those 45 states participate. They've all been trained well, and they use the system very consistently. And the usage basically means that they have a fairly uniform level of performance in capturing their data. So you might find a margin of error of 10% is kind of the high end of what you could change in Washington's numbers relative to other states. But unfortunately, it's probably not enough to explain the size of change that's happened.
And the raw data numbers?
Yeah, so overdose deaths, fatal overdose deaths was I think about 3,400 last year or the year before, I'm sorry, off the top of my head. But it's been now, the last couple of years, in the 3,000s range. And we're hoping to see a change because, well, on the next slide, you'll see some of the national trends that gives us hope that perhaps we'll start seeing that turn. Other questions before I advance? So these charts, I apologize that they're small. This is the national ordering of the non-fatal overdoses that are really captured at a high rate of quality and consistency across the different participating states. One of the strange things about the differences you can see here, and you can see with your own eyes, that the per 10,000 rates are very, very, very elevated among Washington, but then unfortunately also among the states of the Ninth Circuit. And this is a commonality that is important to report, even though I don't blame the Ninth Circuit specifically. We can observe that encampment was the practice at the state level across the Ninth Circuit for a number of years. And I can't, again, explain exactly why this pattern exists, other than to say that the only real detectable difference between the Ninth Circuit states and all of the other states that could explain this, you might want to start with encampments and see if that research investigation provided the answers for why these rates were so elevated. The challenge, though, is that fentanyl and opioids are potent everywhere, and they're popular everywhere. There's some states where they prefer meth. Hawaii is one of them. Montana is another. But because they're potent everywhere and because they're available everywhere, it's difficult to explain these differences other than to say they're especially available in Washington, especially available in Oregon, and other states in the Ninth Circuit. Moving on.
I think Tony might have got it. So, would it be because of the laws that we have here, or it just, I think?
That's a complex question. Again, I don't, this is an area where I can't give a clear answer. It's likely the laws have something to do with it. Yeah. But then again, cost of living also tends to more strongly concentrate in the Ninth Circuit than other places. Yeah. A lot of these things, there isn't one answer, but it could be a combination of things.
Okay. All right.
This is going back to that growth of per capita drug overdose death that we were talking about earlier. But you'll see again that Washington, then also the Ninth Circuit, really strongly represent where that growth in overdose death occurred. And it's difficult, again, to answer why that might be, other than to acknowledge that we were encountering significant system-level changes in encampments kind of becoming statewide legal, uniquely in the Ninth Circuit. But then again, not every state in the Ninth Circuit underwent that change, particularly Idaho and Montana did not. If you talk to policymakers in those states, they would also say that they're very tough on crime. That's not what I'm advocating, but it's the answer that they would give. That's not the explanation, in my view, but it is, an explanation that at least deserves looking at.
Well, the data is the data, right?
The data is the data, but again, I don't want to overstate what the data shows, because it's dangerous to make claims that the data, might look like it supports the claim, but it's really not enough research has been done to say whether it does or not. Yep. This is the trend, though, and I wanted to talk about this trend because this is what happened in overdose deaths nationally. You see Washington in red. You see other states in green. By the way, this is averaging and overlaying the trends of everyone, so it's a little bit of technique involved in doing that, but it's mathematically honest and at least shows you the timing and the direction of changes that have happened nationally and in Washington and other states. Washington and the Ninth all have a very similar pattern. That's strange. It's strange to see such a coherent pattern across 9 states. But then also we're very different than the national pattern. We're different than all of the other states that aren't in the Ninth, and we're very different than all of the other states that are expensive. The light blue line is an average of every other state, not in the Ninth Circuit, that has housing costs that are above the national average. And you can see the trend behavior nationally and in costly places. They behave the same way. An uptick during COVID, very strong uptick during COVID, and then a very, very strong recovery, a historic recovery. There were states that wiped out 10 years of gains in drug overdose deaths in 1 year, last year. That's that big plummet you see at the end. Washington and the Ninth Circuit remain elevated, and it's almost a pattern that's consistent with being resistant to recovery or delayed in recovery compared to other places. And so it's important to ask why that is the case. I'm not here to explain it, just to observe that that's what's happened. But it is highly significant that Washington and the other Ninth Circuit states look so different. And this is actually information that I've been sharing with with Representative Gregerson and Representative Peterson as they've been deliberating what to do with House Bill 2489. This is one other, just kind of breaking it out so you can see. You actually can't see on this one. There's very faint gray lines that show every other state charted as spaghetti. And you maybe can see that in your packet, but you can't see it here. There's a coherent pattern. Even when you back all of these things out of the average, there's a coherent pattern that's shown amongst Ninth Circuit states. And if you can make out the faint spaghetti lines, you'll see that that pattern exists nowhere other than the Ninth Circuit. Other questions? Yeah, please, council member. I'm going to go back.
So with the households, with the costly income, that means they're making more money than the other Ninth Circuit states, right?
The other costly states do not necessarily have higher average incomes or median incomes than
Oh, they do not?
I did not model that,
okay.
But my guess is they're probably about equivalent.
Okay, the reason why I asked that question, because I'm thinking that if they're making more money than the rest of the states listed on here, they can afford to take their child or their siblings to a hospital for an overdose and have it not recorded, you know, because they have the money, or they can have a doctor come to their house because they had the type of funds to do that. And that's just my thought. That's probably why it's not being recorded in some of these areas.
You know, council member, that's possible. I can't say whether that's the case, but I understand what you're saying. I have not seen significant differences in income across those states,
okay.
Particularly because California and Washington, excuse me, have fairly high levels of income, median income, compared to the other states.
Okay. Okay, that was just a thought, though. I was just looking at it. I thought I would run that by you. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Moving on, these are just some patterns, some trend similarities, because we need to understand across populations, are we really looking at the same thing? If you look at methamphetamine use among housed adults, this represents by 2024, about 100,000 housed adults that have reported to the federal government through surveys that they're engaged in use of methamphetamine. And drug poisoning deaths, this is across all adults. Those trends are almost the same line. When we look in the data and model them as in other ways, this is just kind of the percentage of adults on both sides. They become basically the same line when you use standard deviations to study the behavior of the lines. But it gives us confidence that the drug poisoning deaths that we're seeing is not about fentanyl being potent. It really is a signal of use being prevalent and proliferation being elevated. It's also because fentanyl is prevalent. But because the lines are so similar and the patterns are so similar, we have confidence that when we look at drug poisoning deaths, it's telling us drugs are more potent and more people are using them. But applying that line to King County's 10% AMI households and looking at the similarities in timing and direction of drug poisoning deaths is a signal of proliferation, and the size of population of people earning nearly zero income in King County. Again, you'll see that the similarity of these things is extraordinary. Not just in when do they surge up, but when do they turn down. And so we have to imagine that there may be some relationship there for either being in 10% AMI increases the likelihood that you'll engage in risky drug use behavior, or that there's a bidirectional relationship where perhaps drug use behavior has led the household into King County's 10% AMI band. And I'm not saying that it's one or the other, because probably both things happen. But the relationship between the two shows at least that we're probably looking at similar populations. Yes.
Is there significance to the labeling change between
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Laziness, that's the significance, just that the preparer of the information was lazy and missed something that they should have not missed. The drug poisoning deaths actually is a better number to use because it's captured more carefully at the state level, but it does include alcohol deaths. And so it changes to drug poisoning when alcohol is included, but it can more classically be called drug overdose mortality when not including alcohol. Not every researcher treats it the same way. Not everyone talks about it the same way, but that's how it's treated in this study. The next thing, because studying King County's 10% AMI group can be a little statistically noisy, actually stretching that out to 15% can help account to make sure that you're really capturing everyone that's genuinely living at that level. But you can see the relationship between the growth of that population and the growth of Pitt candidate homelessness has similar trend lines. When you apply statistical, we call the coefficient of determination, an R squared. If you've read Homelessness as a Housing Problem, that book uses the R squared to associate homelessness with housing costs. So applying the same technique to these trends and looking at the fit between the trends, it's a coefficient of determination, an R squared, and an R2 value of 0.7, which I don't use this explanation, but some researchers say that means that the variance of Pitt, the variance above the baseline that it should be at, 70% of that variance would be explained by the growth of 15% AMI. Again, that's not a claim I'm making, but using the techniques that other researchers have used, that's the conclusion that they would reach. And then looking at a composite. This is just for comparison, but it's compositing Pitt homelessness with chronic homelessness and meth use with overdose deaths and fitting those lines together. Again, you see that those lines are very similar in their behavior. They move and change and grow in similar ways and at similar times. Importantly, when you see the green line rise above the blue, that in statistics is what we would call a time-ordered relationship, where one thing rises more strongly and then later the other thing rises strongly in response, like an impulse response pattern. It might be that, but you can see in all kinds of different ways of slicing the data that very consistently drug use and overdose death are rising in advance of rising homelessness. When you see a surge happen in 1 year, within the next couple years, you're going to see the echoing homelessness surge. I'm going to be very careful not to say that one is causing the other, but it's a pattern that exists, and it's a pattern that the state's own researchers should pay more attention to and investigate more carefully. I'm going to move on again to the thing in epidemiology we call the population attributable fraction. Are these things causing homelessness, or what percentage are they causing? It's hard to say. It's very, very, very unlikely that the populations you're seeing on this chart are completely unrelated to each other. In fact, it's almost impossible that they're completely unrelated to each other. The population of people who are engaged in use of risky drugs is immediately adjacent to homelessness because research over many decades has evidenced that the likelihood of job loss and the likelihood of housing loss is very closely tied to use of risky drugs. In fact, a study that was done by researchers led by Thompson in the 2010s studied tens of thousands of households and found that among those tens of thousands of households, if you were experiencing poverty and experiencing drug use disorder, 34% of the cohort lost housing by 3 years. If you were only experiencing poverty, 6% of the cohort lost housing. And if you were only experiencing a drug use disorder, 12% of the cohort lost housing. But it was a combination of affordability and drug use disorders, which caused a third of that sample to lose housing after 3 years. So because we have research like that that's been done and accepted and has existed for more than a decade, I think we can accept that we're probably looking at least at significant overlap between the populations that you're seeing on these charts. And if that's the case, then housing alone is not enough. And we have to be making other investments as government in order to respond to the crisis that confronts us. But I'm happy to take questions from council.
Councilmember Troutner.
Thank you, Madam President. Eric, super important, very fascinating information. You have done a fabulous job. You mentioned that you have been speaking with Gregerson and Peterson. So my question, couple questions. How is your success in presenting this information to legislators? And then I would imagine if we looked at this data for King County versus the rest of the state, we would see high numbers in King County. But I'm also wondering where your success is with presenting this to the King County Council, the executive, and what feedback you're getting from there.
Sure. And I'll have to give you a cautious answer because I don't want to speak on behalf of others. Can I answer your second question first? These numbers are statewide. Though I've focused on King County, the trends are all happening statewide. The version of it that's happening outside King County is a bit more blunted, but just a bit. It's more like King County has an amplified version of it, and Washington itself has an amplified version of what we see, in the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit has an amplified version of what we see nationally. So it's like amplification stacked on top. But that does give you King County, which might be the most amplified place in the country for these problems at the moment.
And are you having success in talking with?
I've met with researchers. I've met with practitioners, folks inside King County, inside the state of Washington. I've met with a lot of members of the legislature, mostly on the Democrat side. As I'm a Democrat, I tend to talk more with my colleagues. I've talked to a few members of the Republican caucus as well. I have not yet met anyone who said that this is wrong, whether they're a researcher, whether they're a practitioner inside KCRHA, King County Housing. Nowhere has anyone said that it's wrong. The response has more generally been, this deserves attention and careful review. And in terms of how does that translate into legislation, I suspect that the leaders of the House and Senate are going to be very, very cautious this year with legislation, whereas in the past they might have been a little more energetic to really shake things up. I think they're going to be more cautious and wonder, is it possible that changes we've made in the past have had unintended consequences? But that's just speculation. I know that they're very well-meaning people and really dedicated public servants who I think are trying to do their best. But this information kind of comes out of nowhere too, because it's not vectors the state was carefully following. The attention was so much on housing that kind of a silo of information and silo of data got built up around it, and the state hadn't really paused to carefully look outside of housing. What else do we see?
You talk about at the state level, which is good. I'm just curious, Normandy Park, right? What is it like in your area?
Normandy Park is very small, and we might have someone experiencing homelessness tonight, maybe one or two people, but typically we don't have anyone experiencing homelessness. I can't say that has anything to do with our policy. I don't think there's policy decisions that have affected that at all. I think it's just the way things happen to arrange around the county.
I think also where you live too, right? So when you look at living in Normandy Park, Mercer Island, it's talking some cases night and day too, right?
And in fact, based on my experiences in Normandy Park, I would have almost no experience at all with homelessness or no ability to talk about it.
Yep. Yeah. I got lots of friends who live over there, so yeah.
Councilmember Michaud, followed by Councilmember Troutner again.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you so much, Eric, for this information. I appreciate the academic approach to presenting this information. Oftentimes what we hear is anecdotal, and so I appreciate having the numbers here. What is one thing you want us to take away from your presentation?
I think it's really the individuals are always a recipe. Anyone's life is a combination of so many things, and even where they are today is maybe where they won't be tomorrow. But that makes it challenging to understand how also to help someone. But I think that if you're at the policy level trying to create solutions for homelessness, I would just encourage you not to focus on just one thing, and be very careful to think of the big picture of the challenges people are experiencing, and that it's okay to say that, yes, it absolutely is housing costs, and housing costs, we have to do something about that. That's a good and true thing to say. But if you say only that, then I think that creates risk, and I think that's what Washington's experienced, is the result of too much focus on one thing and not enough focus in other problems that were keeping people from progressing out of the condition that they were in.
Councilmember Troutner?
Thank you, Council President. Not necessarily a question, but kind of what you were talking about, Councilmember Boyce. I know John and I had a conversation earlier. He asked you about the situation of unhoused people in Normandy Park. But I think, you know, especially in our case here in Kent, people are going to go to where they're getting services. And so that's why you see concentrations in more places than you would in other places.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And
Services and transportation and everything else. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Mayor.
your time, and really appreciate the good work your council is doing, and happy to support any other future conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming down to give a presentation to us and giving this information. And it's a lot to absorb for everyone, and it does give us different perspectives. So thank you so much.
There's also a written report. There's a 7-page executive summary version. There's a 80-page full report.
Absolutely. I think maybe if we can get it, if you're interested in getting it in an email, and would love to.
And the thing I would encourage as well is question everything. You know, never be given a number, you know, that you can't pressure or try to break. And that's a good practice, I think, for everything. If I share information with you, pressure it and try to break it. And if you see anything else on homelessness, pressure it and try to break it, and let that be the discipline of always finding the answer that might exist behind the numbers. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned until 7 o'clock for council meeting. Thank you.